Hi everyone, it's Ash from FPL Hints here with my final FPL draft before the FPL 24-25 game launches. As always, if you're able to like, share and subscribe, that'll be greatly appreciated. Now, ideally, I would have just left it with the two drafts that I had and used them as my reference point with the game launching imminently, but I thought, you know what? I can't really do it justice because of a number of factors that, since recording that last video, have really made me change my mind. So, what I'm going to do is just explain what the potential changes are and why it's important for me to have that reference point. Of course, many FPL managers aren't even thinking about FPL right now, and they'll probably think about it when they log in at the first time on the game's launch. But for me, I like having that reference point as I did last summer, and it just puts me in good stead so that I, you know, at least have an idea on who I want to get. And the pricing with FPL.team that you can see on screen there was relatively accurate last season as well. And I'm fairly confident that at least 90 to 95% of the prices that they have are reasonable on face value anyway. So just a quick reminder of my team before I go into the nitty gritty of what I'm looking to change. So got Leno in goal with my team, and in terms of my defence, that's Saliba. I've got Pedro Porro, Fabian Schär, and then a midfield of Diaz, Palmer, Odegaard, and Gordon, and then strike force of Mateta, Isak, Haaland, and the subs being Henderson, Amad Diallo, Bree, and Clark. The reality is that there are quite a lot of flaws within this team that I did like the starting players that I had, but the team isn't balanced enough. But there's also a few game changing things that have made me decide that I can't really justify this as the reference point draft that I'm going to use. So, first of all, as you can see on screen right there, Elise move to Bayern has now been confirmed. So, that clearly weakens that Palace attack. You mentioned under the new manager, especially in the latter half of the 23-24 season. They're playing fantastic attacking football, goals galore. And with such a key player as Elise not being there, it remains to be seen what kind of dynamic the attack will have. No doubt they've already got a replacement lined up, but then it takes time for that replacement to adapt within the team. But the other kicker really is Mateta, who's playing in the Olympic team for France. And of course, he got the Euros and Copa America this summer as well. But the Olympic football takes place a lot later than those tournaments. And I believe that the Olympic final itself is a week before game week one. And in the event that France got that far and Mateta was to feature, I think there's a very high possibility that he may not even start the first game for Crystal Palace. Now, on top of that, just going back to how the squad was with a critical eye, I feel that I don't have enough Man City players, and ideally would want to shoehorn in a Man City player into this squad as well. Kind of feel that the Liverpool attack could be beefed up as well. And also Luis Diaz, I talked about like trying to avoid players that are playing in tournament football this summer. Diaz, of course, is at the Copa America with Colombia, so I've got to really get rid of him. Doesn't really justify the spend. And the bench, of course, it's very weak, it's very hollow as well. That I'd want at least one reasonable sub one, a 4.5 sub two, and then a 4.0 dud sub, as it were. So need to factor that all in as well here. And then also factoring in with the Euros, those players that are in the latter stages of that tournament as well, that there might be a possibility that those that are featured heavily might get an additional rest and could be at risk from starting in game week one as well. So without further ado, let's get straight into making the edits. So Mateta for my final FPL draft before the game launches is gone. In terms of who I'm going to replace him with, I'll give that some further thought. Let me just see if I can just confirm it now. So Ollie Watkins, who hasn't really featured heavily for England at all at the Euros to date, so could be an option. Jackson for Chelsea. After what happened, if Chelsea do sign another striker, if Nkunku is fully fit, needs to be factored in as well. And of course, you got Solanke as well. And to be fair with Bournemouth, they've got a reasonable start with Forest and Everton in the first 2 games out of 3. And then further down, got Alvarez for Man City. Something that is worth bearing in mind. I did have Havertz in my initial thinking, and with Germany exiting at the quarterfinal stage, might be a possibility that he might get some game time. So let's just try that. Teta out and Havertz in for now. Of course, with the budget as it is, I'm a million over. And we mentioned Fabian Schär. One good thing that I do like about FPL.team is the ability to be able to change the predicted prices as well. So in this instance, I'm going to change Fabian Schär to 5.0 million. And of course, in terms of what I've got in the bank, it's now minus 1.5. Luis Diaz is another player that I'm going to get rid of because of Copa America. And just looking at the higher owned players here, Saka won't be getting him in, or Foden, or Son for the time being due to the price tags doesn't really work right now. And just going further down here, just a reminder of Manchester United's fixtures as well for those opening games. Of course, Ten Hag has appeared to have saved his job after his heroics in the FA Cup final. And as we can see on screen there, United have Fulham at home, Brighton away, Liverpool at home, and Southampton away in the opening games. So it could be justification to potentially get a Manchester United player in. But I'm actually going to go to Manchester City. And this might be somewhat of a maverick pick, but I want you to hear me out on this. And the player I'm looking at as my Diaz replacement, I talked about getting double Man City cover. It is Jack Grealish. Now, Jack Grealish, of course, missed out on the Euro squad. And of course, there were rumours at the time of him missing out that many players weren't happy with that choice. But clearly, he was out of form during the 23-24 season. I kind of feel that he'll really be up for it for the new season, whatever happens with England's final outcome at the Euros. And I kind of feel that at his price tag, 7.0 million, offers value. We know what he's capable of when he's fully fit and in form. So Jack Grealish is my placeholder Man City player for now. Means I've got double Man City. And then looking at the budget, I'm just a million over now. Of course, I've got Palmer, who I feel is a no-nonsense pick, and Odegaard, where I've argued I wanted Arsenal cover, but I wanted a player who wasn't at the Euros as well, and Odegaard fit the bill. Same with Haaland as well, with Man City, and not playing at the Euros. But clearly, I still need to rejig this team because I need to unlock funds. And just reminding myself back on the fixtures as well. Again, looking at Spurs in particular, Leicester away, Everton at home, and then you've got Newcastle and Arsenal and Man United in those upcoming fixtures as well. Can I justify Pedro Porro at 5.5 million? So let's go to the defenders, most popular owned players right now. Is there a 5.0 million defender that catches my eye? You've got Stupin in there. And again, with him, he was really great in 22-23 in the second half of the season. Started off 23-24 really well, but then kind of went quiet for the remainder of last season. So I'll probably give Estupiñán a miss for now. I did have like a Crystal Palace cover with Henderson, and the fixtures, I wouldn't say they're great, but I'd have if I wanted a goalkeeper, I think he makes sense for now in the 4.5 bracket. Of course, there's Anderson there as well. Just wondering, would I get double Newcastle defence with their reasonable fixtures? I probably won't, but just seeing who else I could really get here, if I could just rejig my team perhaps. And of course, I'm now lacking Liverpool cover and got Alexander-Arnold there. Need to give that some thought as well. So just looking at the fixtures in particular, just calling out like players who I'd want from the defence standpoint, I would consider Nottingham Forest reluctantly as a sub-1 defender perhaps. Newcastle, triple up. Manchester United possibly. Really want some sort of Liverpool cover with their fixtures as well. But on the whole, there aren't a lot of teams, defenders that really stand out apart from those that proved themselves last season. So it's a tough one, but I am going to still try and get rid of Porro to unlock some funds. So I need a 4.5 defender. So let's go with Tarkowski here at 4.5 million. In he comes just to get some balance, and looking at the bank there, fully maxed out, home to Brighton in that first game. So now that I've switched screens, you can see I've got Turner as my substitute goalkeeper, Anderson as my sub-1, Sarr as my sub-2, and Clark as my dud sub 4.0 defender. And looking at the price in the bank, it comes up to 0.0 exactly. Just a reminder of those prices and what I think is or isn't right. Leno, 4.5 million. I think that will be his price. Tarkowski, again, 4.5, based on how Everton finished and where they finished. Sounds about right as well. Saliba, definitely bumped up to 6 million. Fabian Schär, who I did increase from 4.5 to 5, purely because his price was more than 5 towards the end of last season. Of course, Newcastle are no longer a Champions League team, but I think 5 sounds about right for him, and with his attacking prowess. Onto the midfield, Grealish at 7.0 million. I'd say that sounds about right as well. Palmer, whose price will almost double with the sensational form that he was in, sounds about right as well, 9.5 million. Odegaard, I'd say 8.5 sounds about right. And Gordon's price will be bumped up to 7.5. And then Havertz, 8.0 and reclassified as a forward. Isak, 8.5. And I wouldn't expect Haaland's price to change, 14 million there. So that is how it's looking right now. And compared to how my team was during the last draft, I'd say this is considerably more balanced. And what I'm going to do, actually, just a quick side note, when the FPL game does launch, I will do a direct comparison of the FPL.team pricing as well as the official FPL pricing with the exact same squad you can see on screen there. I've got no doubt the price might be out slightly here and there, but I'd say it's relatively accurate. It might be 500,000 out possibly. So I'm fairly content with this. I've now got double City and in attack in particular. So there's not that extreme rotation risk as we see it at times with their defenders. Triple Arsenal with the spine of my team. Got triple Newcastle, and of course, the risk is that if both Newcastle and Arsenal get off to a very bad start, then that's what most of my starting 11 who are compromised. So something that I'd need to potentially reconsider as we get towards game week 1. Tarkowski as a 4.5 and Anderson, who I could potentially start one or the other. I'll be honest with you, I've not really looked at the rotation, but I will potentially look at a rotating defensive pair, 4.5, 4.5, for those opening games, just so that I've got some depth on the bench. On the bench itself, got Saar as a 4.5 million option, not because I'm expecting him to score points, but just some fodder on the bench. And if the rules change within the 24-25 season, as it potentially is being rumoured that ball recoveries could be a metric, then he could come as an option. But I just feel that Anderson, Saar, and Clark, where I've got a guaranteed start on Anderson, Saar, who's did get minutes for Spurs last season, and a dud sub 4.0, makes more sense than having Diallo, who may not even get many minutes despite the way he ended last season, and then two 4.0 defenders. I really can't justify it. But then look at the starting 11. I'd say that is very balanced. So let's do my super zoom in so that we can go through this draft one final time. And like I've said, this is my final FPL draft before the game launches. So Leno in goal, no rotating goalkeeper, so I've got to rely on him for the long haul potentially until I wildcard. A defence of Tarkowski, Saliba, and Cher. So a lot of balance and a bit of attacking prowess. Onto the midfield, Gordon, who, because he's been effectively a utility player for England, hopefully he'll start for Newcastle in game week 1, despite England getting to the latter stages of the Euros. Odegaard, who didn't feature in the Euros, expecting to be a full-on starter for Arsenal. And Palmer, who up until now has had a limited role in England's squad. And then Grealish, who of course didn't make the Euro squad. I'd expect him to potentially hit the ground running if he can get a start. And that is the caveat, that if I feel that Grealish isn't guaranteed to start in the opening game on the opening games, then I'd look for an alternative 7.0. I think that forward lineup of Havertz, Isak, and Haaland will probably be the template forward lineup unless some new players sign. And lastly, onto the bench, 4.0 goalkeeper, two 4.5 players, one of whom I would more than likely use as a rotating pair, and then one being fodder, and then 4.0 potential fodder as well. So there you have it. Let me know in the comments below what you think with this final draft before the game launches. Have I finally got the balance right? Or do I still need some Liverpool cover? I think I'll have to come on to that and address it at some point as well. But for now, at least, I've got something to work with, and it's something I'll factor in. Unfortunately, I can't justify it in the draft. No doubt I'll try and make it work once a game goes live. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have I got the balance right? Does it need rejigging? And is there anything that you like or dislike? All the best ahead of the FPL launch. If you're wondering when the FPL game will launch, I've got a video, and I'll put a link in the description below, that provides some parameters and signs to look out for so that you can make sure that you can register early and get a low ID, because a low ID does matter in Fantasy Premier League as a form of a tiebreaker with prizes. So there you have it. Take care and all the best.